Hey everyone, welcome back to the fifth workshop for the Solana Hackathon. Today, we're going to be joined by Viets from Big Brain Holdings, who will be giving a talk on how to pitch your startup, followed by a quick Q&A. So I hope everyone's ready and bring some questions. And just a quick reminder to everyone, for any information about the hack, please refer to the Hacker Pack. I'll quickly just post that in chat now. If you have any further questions that you can't find answers to on the Hacker Pack, remember to reach out to myself or Dan by either booking the one-on-one calls using the links at the bottom of the Hacker Pack, or simply DMing us on Discord. So that's all from me. And over to Viets from Big Brain Holdings to give a talk on how to pitch your startup. Oh, hello. Hi. Just a quick hi. Welcome. Just a quick reminder to everyone before we start our talk. Remember to prepare some questions, as we'll be having a Q&A after. And over to you, Viets.
Thank you so much,
share your screen and get started. No worries.
Thanks a lot. So hey everyone, I saw a lot of activity in the chat, so appreciate you guys all being here. So I'm just gonna start by giving like a pretty brief introduction to me. I'm Viets. I work as an analyst with Big Brain Holdings. My background's really in TradFi, so I got into this space in about like October 2021. But prior to that, I was in banking for about 7 years, did a lot of risk management, portfolio management, that kind of stuff. And yeah, went down the crypto rabbit hole and decided I didn't want to leave. And so I started working with the team in 2022, helping them to vet a lot of early stage projects, having a lot of chat with founders, developers, going to a lot of hackathons and hacker houses. And yeah, just kind of getting like the first intro into like what's innovative and what's like, you know, at the cutting edge of this space. And a little bit about Big Brain Holdings. We're an early stage VC. We've been in this space actively since about 2017, but deploying under Big Brain Holdings since 2021. And we're very chain agnostic, sector agnostic. We like early stage pre-seed seed investing, but we'll invest in, you know, like from layer 1 to infrastructure to dApps building on top of the chains, anything that's really looking to change the way we currently operate and we think is innovative. We're willing to put some money in and back a lot of the founders in the space. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background and Big Brain Holdings, and we can get into like any like specific questions like after the presentation. I enjoy the pitching part of things. I love sitting at the table that I do because I get to talk to a lot of people. And one of the great things about talking to builders is you get their firsthand passion and their approach and like what makes them super unique. And so I wanted to kind of like touch on, you know, what you would need to pitch your startup at a demo day, for example, or at a, you know, like you're going to a VC and, you know, it's a 15-minute call or it's a 30-minute call, how to kind of maximize that time frame. And I stress the time frame because in this space, everything moves super quickly. If you've got a 30-minute call, you kind of want to maximize the most on that and give the VC on the other end the opportunity to ask like questions they may have. And you also want to keep the attention focused because, you know, there's so many things coming at that person. And so being able to capitalize best on that time, it's really a bit of a skill and an art form as well. So yeah, I'll just get right into it. One of the things is like, it seems a lot of this is going to be things that you know on some level. Some of it you may not have necessarily thought of or think of it as like tangible, but they're things that are usually kind of overlooked, but they're so critical to the entire process. So telling us who you are, a little bit about yourself and your team, what's your background in the space? Like what made you kind of go into this type of project? Why are you credible? And why should I trust you to launch? This particular part, I like to keep it under a minute, like have your spiel ready to go, practice it in the mirror. Like, you know yourself better than anyone. You also know your team better than anyone. So that should be something that like should roll off the tip of your tongue. You're at a conference or you're at a demo day or, you know, you're hopping on a call. That should really be the first thing that you can kind of be able to speak to and instill that initial trust and confidence from the very beginning. Problem statements. Definitely, we need to be like super clear on this when you're going in, because a lot of the time I find with especially new developers to the space, they'll assume that this problem is something that everyone is aware of. It needs to be clearly defined, understandable, and relatable. So what you want to do is have a lot of analogies, stories, and examples. Why is this a problem to the average user? Or why is this a problem to your end user? And why does it actually matter? It might exist like in your headspace and within your circle or your bubble, but a lot of things don't necessarily translate that way outside of that. So you need to make it super clear why this is important and why it needs fixing. When you present your solution, which is obviously your product, how exactly you're solving the problem is very, very critical. So we look at a lot of white papers, we read a lot of articles, we do a lot of deep dive in the ecosystems that we are a part of and we invest in. So we have a very good technical understanding of what it takes to, fix a lot of the issues that consumers end up having. But to communicate that in a short space of time, it's not going to be a white paper, right? It's going to be a short video, or it's going to be some like graphic visual representation, something that describes a user flow, and your ability to walk us through where the problem typically occurs and where your solution fits is what's critical here. Keeping that in about 3 minutes, it's a perfect snapshot, because it tells me graphically what I'm looking at, and me as the end user or the end market, I can sort of feel, okay, this is where I would need some sort of support or guidance, and this is where your solution comes in. Market potential. I like to keep this under 2 minutes, because you can really this can go very, very wide. So a lot of it is data. You've obviously done your research. You've understood the metrics that allow you to be at the top of the game. I need to know that as well. Like, what is the market size? What is the opportunity? How many users? What type of revenue? Potential return on the investment. This is like literally a numbers game, because when you're talking to a VC for funding, it literally does come down to the numbers. It also tells me as a person on the other side of the table that you've done your research, you're credible. There's lots of times I'm doing a comp analysis and I will just message the founder. I'm like, hey, have you looked into this project? And they'll be like, yeah, absolutely. Here's how many users they have. Here's how many users I have. And then I'm like, okay, well, this person, I can rely on them. They're trustworthy. And they're able to give that data to me in a snapshot. So very graphic data is like, it's great. Like, have it in a bar chart, a pie chart, or trends or something like that, that is easy to digest for the person on the other end of it. Business and revenue model. This is where things get exciting and fun. You're talking money now. So one of the things too I like to point out is that they're very different audiences. And so you have to be able to speak to your audience at a level that makes sense for them. If you've got angel investors, you've got syndicates, you've got foundations, and you've got VCs, those are, yes, people that are all interested in your product, but they might have different risk appetites and different financial abilities. So you find for foundations, they tend to go to hackathons really because they're looking for people who are investing in their platform, and they will give you a grant, which the only return is that you keep investing in their platform. You keep building, you keep designing new products, you keep generating new users, you're onboarding. And so their return is more about active users and that side of things, as opposed to like financial return. Whereas if you're talking to a VC or you're talking to a syndicate, they're looking for a more, monetary value. So you need to kind of like figure out who you're pitching to, and like just display your revenue model in a way that makes sense. Explain how your startup is going to make money. Is it going to be transaction fees? Is it going to be subscription fees? Do you have other revenue streams you're looking at? If it's not really a revenue generating heavy project, then you might want to think who you're pitching to and sort of make sure that you're meeting that particular metric for them as well. Competitive landscape. This ties in a little bit with the market side of things, but this is where you're actually pulling your exact competitor, direct competitors, or like, maybe in a parallel space competitor. It's a very visual type of presentation slide, so to speak. So you're going to want to have like a table or a chart or something. A lot of you would know this, like you have your name of your competitor and then what product services they offer or they may be lacking, and then what your product or offer service is going to be different to that. So a lot of research matters here. You want to see what the key differentiators are. Is it the tech? Is it the team? Partnerships? Anything in particular that's super unique that makes your product or service stand out. Also, and this is for me personally super critical, why has this not been done before if you're the first mover? Is it because the problem isn't one that's scalable to solve? Like, is it that it costs too much money to solve? And what makes you uniquely able to solve for the problem at this point in time? And it's the best step for right now. Again, 2 minutes is completely ideal. A lot of this is going to be things that you've thought about for a period of time, but being able to simplify it and shorten it in a way that's digestible and easy for the person on the other end, then you're good to go. Traction and wins. I once went to a conference where I was speaking to a therapist, and she said, everyone should have a brag book, which is everything you've ever done that at that moment you got incredible traction for, or you felt some sense of accomplishment, or has, made you into who you are today. It's your opportunity to brag. And I think every single startup and project founder and developer should absolutely have their own brag book. And then you compile that brag book into this one slide where you share all of these wins. So you want like your user numbers, revenue, partnerships, anything that makes your project look phenomenally good. This is the opportunity to tell us about it, because we're not going to know. Like, if you've got letters of intent, that's where you want to highlight it. It's like, hey, we've got these major partnerships and we've got these foundations that are interested, and this is what our users have been saying. Those are all things that VCs love to hear, because it tells us that there's actual success to back what it is that you're working on. Another thing that I think is not usually very highlighted, and I think it's super critical. What are you asking for? Again, goes back to who are you pitching to, right? What are you asking for the investor? Is it that you want strategic support? Is it that you need additional funding? Are you looking for user feedback? Are there other resources? Are you looking for introductions to potential clients? The ask should be super clear, and there should be no room for any kind of like ambiguity or misinterpretation, because we need to be very clear how we can help you and whether or not we are a good fit for you. 60 seconds, I think, should easily get that point across. And yeah, wrapping up like your pitch, love to hear it and on a super high positive note. Like, I love a pitch that at the end of it, I feel super inspired. I see logically how this is going to impact my life and could change the world. And I know that sounds like a huge ask, but that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to make something better that other people will want to be a part of, and they'll want to participate. And so you should walk away from the pitch knowing that you've put that thought into the minds of the VC that, hey, if we're not in this round, we're going to be missing out on a huge opportunity. And this project is the obvious choice, and it just makes sense. 2 minutes to kind of wrap that up, leave you on a high note. It's perfect. Like, it can even be less than that, but it's really your summary of everything you've talked about, and also like what you bring to the table to be able to accomplish it. So yeah, that's like the end of the presentation.
So if we want to go over to a Q&A now.
Yeah, I'm going to open it up to questions.
So if anyone has any questions, post them in chat now.
Okay, thanks. On the funding slide, how specific should you be? Actual number and valuation range. As specific as you can get. What we do realize is a lot of startups sort of do need a hand figuring out where they land for valuation. And so we tend to be a little bit more flexible if there's a range there. But when it comes to how much you're requesting for funding, if you've got like a lot of, let's say, go-to-market strategies that you need to pay for, if you're paying for AWS services, if you're, all of those things should be added. You have your runway in place. Like if you're estimating your runway to take you, let's say 12 months or 24 months, you know how much you're burning per month. That should be a very specific number as to like on the deck, hey, I'm raising 1 million. I don't know what valuation yet, but I need 1 million, right? Like we're a lot more flexible on the valuation side. On the number side, you want to make sure you have some very, very specific numbers. Can you share examples of a successful startup pitch? Oh, wow. There's a lot. We have a very large portfolio base. So you're looking at like 200 plus portfolio companies that had, in my opinion, really good pitches, but they all have very key characteristics in the sense that, like I said, it was the obvious choice by the time they were done. Like, and they all did the things that I would have mentioned, you know, during my presentation, which is I had a lot of confidence in the team. They had credible, like, success stories behind them. They were able to give me a lot of data and numbers that made sense. When I did my research, a lot of what they said, you know, came back as, you know, people that I could rely on for that information. And their solution was innovative, right? That's the other thing. Like if you're just like getting into this game to build another platform that already exists, what is the moat? What is the key that makes you successful, right? So it has to be something that really inspires confidence that, yeah, this is the team to execute this. Because sometimes the idea is great. It's not the team that can execute it. And then sometimes the idea is not that great, but it's a fantastic team who can build anything. So it's all about finding that balance. But again, like the presentation I just went through, all the most successful pitches that we funded or done really well have had those components. When Moon, I have no idea. I'd love to know myself. That would be great.
We also have a question in the questions tab. It says, "Thank you for your talk. Do you have any techniques for making sure a pitch is as engaging as it can possibly be?"
My best ones are always conversations. I love that. Like, take a bit of time to find out who you're pitching to. If you have like any kind of context, like you know the type of VC or who the person is, do a little bit of research, just like high level before. Try to find out like what they're interested in or they invest in. Usually, like take a look at their portfolio companies, and then just kind of tailor the conversation to suit that. If you just throw up a deck and you go right into it, it kind of sounds very like robotic. And it's more of a sales pitch as opposed to trying to inspire us to be a part of your startup journey. So it's all about like just making sure that it's more of a conversation and it's relatable. Okay, how do you suggest practicing for a pitch, making sure you're well prepared but doesn't sound too unnatural and scripted? Your family and friends, annoy them as much as possible with your pitch. It sounds funny, but like having a normal person listen to you who there's like very little expectation of and like you don't have to be nervous around helps you to sound a lot more natural. Go through the deck as many times as you need to. Having the deck where you can just pull the idea as a bullet point and then expand on it, like instead of reading directly off the deck, that's also something that helps. What I find is a lot of technical developers have a hard time explaining that technicality when they're pitching to a VC. And so one of the things I do, and I'm not a techie person. So I love to tell devs, like, if you can get me to understand what you're doing, then you've won me over. So what those devs tend to do well is explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. Find a lot of good stories related to a lot of good analogies. That's actually what makes it sound a lot more natural, because from that point, you're speaking from a point of passion and not just like the technical side of things. And that comes across as well when you talk to the VC. I don't know if I'm missing any other questions. Okay. How do you handle nerves or stage fright when pitching? So I was telling this to Patrick earlier when we were doing the test. I'm actually not a public speaker. I hate it a lot. But I find like just in my head, that's where a lot of it exists. And so the more I feel confident about what I'm talking about, like I'm super like passionate about investing. I've been very passionate about like how to help startups very early in their journey. And because it's something I truly enjoy, I find that I'm a little less nervous. And also I just spend a lot of time like talking to my husband and my dogs. And I like literally that helps me to just not overthink it so much. So in my head, I'm talking to my two dogs, regardless of who I'm talking to, because it's just easier. The visuals for the slides you mentioned is great, but overall designer style, does it matter? Is simpler better? So this is actually a really good question, because there are some pitch decks that are absolutely just boring to look at. And it takes me like 2 or 3 times, like just getting myself geared up to look at it, because it's either too wordy or the graphics are just not that appealing. I usually recommend, like, you can find a really good artist, like, I mean, it could even be a Fiverr artist, who's good at like putting together pitch decks. So you can put together your words and your thoughts, give them a blank slide, and they'll create like super graphic, really nice pitch decks that kind of speak to your branding, speak to your vision, captures a little bit of your company's personality, your personality. And I usually recommend paying a little bit of like that money to do that, because it does matter. We're looking at like hundreds of pitch decks. So absolutely the graphic design and, you know, how it's presented, it does actually make a difference, because it does compel me to, yeah, I really want to look at this one. This one looks interesting. And there's like, you know, videos or content or things that like, you know, require interaction, tend to do really well. What does an ideal early team look like? Will strong devs be mandatory, or using the fund to hire strong devs is still okay as long as the core team or non-devs is solid? That's an interesting question. When I first got into the space, like it was almost a standard that not everyone was very techie or dev oriented. What that ended up like resulting in, like you give it a few months or a year, was that you're spending a lot more money outsourcing your devs. And because the core team are non-technical, they can't fix a lot of the issues that arise when you're working on chain. So I usually advise that if you are a non-dev person and you're building a product that does require a dev, you should at least hire a CTO, even if it's on a sweat equity basis until like after you raise. It gives a lot more confidence to the founding team that if something does go wrong that requires dev support, you don't have to now look for funds to be able to outsource that. So it's still a bit of a balance, but yeah, dev focused teams tend to do a lot better in the long run, because they don't have to spend as much money on burn, and they can fix the issue in-house. Should I submit the smart contract? I don't think that question's for me. I'm not sure, Patrick.
I'm not sure either.
Hello, how do you manage the timeline while the pitch presentation front of the audience? I don't think I'm understanding this question. How do you manage the timeline while the pitch presentation front of the audience oratory? I'm assuming in an amphitheater. Mohammed, I don't know if you want to clarify that question. If it's about managing the timeline, it's usually, I mean, I recommend just timing yourself, but like prior to pitching. So I already know like it's going to take me 15 minutes to go through my presentation, because I've timed myself several times doing it. Sometimes I go a little over, sometimes I'm a little under, but as long as you have like a range. And the other thing is, it's funny, you go to a lot of conferences and you start to see it. The pitches get better and better the more often someone goes to these IRL events or these hackathons, or they participate in like these kind of conversations. They get better and better at their short pitch, to the point where your elevator pitch contains everything I could possibly want. And then me booking a call is really just to find out like the details. So the more you do it, the better you get at it. And it just becomes like very, very natural. Hey, V's, thanks for the talk. I was just wondering, what are some common mistakes to avoid when pitching to venture capitalists? Not giving them an opportunity to speak or ask questions. If you take up a lot of the time talking, one, we get very tired because it's a lot of information coming at us. And two, yeah, it's a little bit like, so what are we doing here, right? So I definitely say like stop frequently to make sure that your audience is still with you, and they're still like, you know, on the same page. You haven't lost them technically or anything like that, which is why I enjoy short pitches. Also, if you don't have the technical know-how, having someone on the call who is the technical person is also very useful, because you want to be able to sort of bounce any of those questions to someone who can handle it. If you're on the call without that support, a lot of the times it may just come across like you're not fully prepared. And so we prefer to have like as much of the team on the call that can handle those questions. And yeah, you don't have to take on a lot of the burden. But really the mistakes to avoid are actually the things that, like I mentioned, you should be doing. Once you do all of those things, there really aren't that many mistakes that you could possibly make. Just make sure that you're super clear, super concise, and the ask is like very, very, very like straightforward. Going to questions. Are there major differences between pitching in a TradFi and Web3 environment? It's weird. I would say yes, but no. A lot of the key things are pretty much the same. Like in TradFi, you do business with the person. It's very much the same in Web3. Although we're in this very decentralized, trustless space, it does essentially come down to trust, because you want to know that this is a team that can deliver. And it's basically exactly what I did with handling like risk management at the bank. Like you had your 5 C's of credit and your investment criteria, and you did all these scoring metrics, and you go to like your risk manager, and the first question they'll ask, so, you know, what is your gut feeling about the person? And that's really what it comes down to. So in terms of like the actual technical aspects, that's obviously like key difference. We're working with blockchain tech. It's very different to traditional investments. Also, the returns are considerably higher in multiples for Web3 investments as opposed to TradFi. TradFi, you're looking at 10 plus years to get your return. Crypto, we look at what, 3 months, and if we don't get a return, we're very confused. So you're working on a very different timeline, which means you have to also meet those expectations. But that's more on like the detail side of things and very like project specific base. In terms of like major risk factors, I would say like for me, it really comes down to the same thing, and it comes down to trust. Mohammed, what is the PowerPoint slides presentation strategy plan? 60 to 20. Okay, that you recommend to adapt while in the pitch session presentation? I try not to go over 15 slides. I find that after 15, people get a little tired. If it's something that needs to go past that, what you could probably do is have a long deck and a short deck. The short deck is what you send initially. That's the one that captures attention. It has a lot of quick, useful insights. It whets the appetite of the reader or the listener. Anything longer than that, you can send after they come back to you and they display interest. They can be like, hey, you didn't cover this, but I'm so curious about it. Can you provide more information? And then you can say, hey, I've got a white paper, I've got a longer deck, I've got a data room, I've got all these things that I can then give to you. But anything more than that, your reader's probably just going to skip past it, and you've missed an opportunity there. Do you have any advice on tailoring pitches for different types of investors? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So a lot of times, like I'll get a very generic pitch which is fine. But there are different categories of investors. So like I mentioned, you have angel investors, you have syndicates, you have foundations, you've got VCs, and these are all people deploying capital. And so what I usually recommend is that you sort of find the groups that you're targeting, and then you have a deck specific to that. The other thing is that if you're developing a product that you need to onboard users, that should also be in its own deck, so that you have a sales deck basically that you can say, hey, this is why you should use this product and why you should do business with us. So definitely tailor, do as much research as possible. Foundations, like I said, there's really no monetary value. So on that page where I mentioned like the ask has to be super specific. You want to be able to speak to things that, let's say you're going to the Solana Foundation and you know that this is what they're interested in, and say, hey, we can provide this sort of support in the Solana ecosystem. And this is why you should take a bet on us. How would you advise maintaining a relationship with potential investors post-pitch? I love Telegram chats. It's like coming out of banking where everything was Slack and Microsoft Teams. Like Telegram chats is now the official way to kind of do business in Web3. And so there's some projects that I actually like. So you get off a call with them, and the first thing we do, we set up a Telegram group chat, and any like subsequent information after that just goes through Telegram. That's me personally. I mean, some people still use email format. I'm not a big fan just because it's just, there are too many emails coming at me. Whereas Telegram feels a little bit more like, yeah, I can communicate without that much pressure. So yeah, just create a Telegram group chat or some way that you can easily communicate. You can send data, you can send information. Also, what you want to do, if you haven't heard back from the investor after, let's say, like a week or whatever time frame they've given you, you just gently ping in the chat. It's easier than an email, which could get buried. You can just say, hey, just following up here. No, we had a call last week. Would love to see where you guys are at in terms of your DD. I also do recommend, even if the VC passes on the investment, you should still send them some updates. I actually have gone back to projects I've passed on because at the time, I don't think that we would have been a good fit. And I'm like, hey, you guys have made a lot of significant progress. I like what you're doing, and, you know, thank you for sending me the updates. And then we may look at it for investment again, or, you know, I could open up conversations to other potential partners. And so just being able to like balance the not being too, I would say, needy and annoying to being like on top of the communication game, at least like, you know, once every week is like ideal, just to keep on top of that. If you think it would be useful, could you tell us about some of the best and worst pitches you've seen? Yeah, it's funny. The best pitches are always like super to the point. I think that's just because my attention span is shorter than probably most people. But there are always things that make me feel at the end of it that this is a problem I can see being really well solved. And this is a team that's going to execute it. And they're usually able to like demo a platform or show me very visually what, you know, what the actual solve is, or they've highlighted a very critical issue that a lot of people either may have overlooked or they just have not executed like the solution properly. Those are always the best pitches. And they're always, you can tell there's a lot of passion from the founders when they're telling you about it, because they've done the research and they've done the hard work, and it's not just a money game to them. It's about making an actual difference. The worst pitches are the one where I feel like, yeah, you're just here for like, you know, me to give you funding, and I don't really feel the passion that coincides with that. It has actually nothing to do with graphics or visuals or anything. It's just, it's a feeling, and it's how you leave the conversation afterwards. But yeah, and something also is like just having someone like proofread your deck or your pitch is actually really useful. Someone who hasn't seen it for as long as you have, because remember, if you're looking at something all the time, it's a bubble, it's in your headspace only. Sometimes just sending it to like a friend or another person on the team, or even a normie and just say, hey, can you read this over? Is this something easy to understand? Like, should I make this any more friendly to digest? That actually does play a difference in like how well it's communicated at the end. Hello, how to manage your body gestures and postures while on the pitch presentation. Okay, so as you can see, I'm super expressive. I talk a lot with my hands. I was always like that even as a kid. It's really just being mindful of it. Like, I'm super mindful that I'm very visually expressive. You can tell what I feel on my face the minute I feel it. But yeah, that is a very tricky thing to kind of, because a lot of founders that I know are not very like socially out there as well. They're builders and they build usually in isolation. And so again, going to a friend or family member is usually the best thing, because if you treat it as though you're talking to someone face to face, even if it's like on a Zoom call or on a Google Meets or whatever the case may be, you'll find you're a lot more aware of your body language as if you were talking to someone in real life. So yeah, just practicing on closest friend or family member, or like I said, the dogs. The dogs are great listeners. Highly recommend them. Going back to the pitch. Yeah, I don't see. Okay, one other question. Do you recommend the use of hand sign communication while in the pitch deck to mark presence in a room? Yes. So if you've got multiple parties, raising your hand is usually, if that's the question that you're asking. I'm not sure if I'm misinterpreting the question, so that's something that if you want to clarify, just let me know. But yeah, if you're like in a large group, or if it's like 3 or more people, absolutely not like hopping over each other is ideal. I just raise my hand strictly because I don't know, it's polite. It just feels right. Not sure if that was the answer to your question, Mohammed. If you want to rephrase it, that's also fine. How can I become a more effective storyteller when I pitch? There's a few things. There's I'm a big fan of TED Talks, and I watch a lot of them. There's actually now like an app for TED Talks, which like back when I used to watch them, it was just YouTube. I would say, yeah, I watch a lot of those just because there's a lot of analogies with a lot of these big presenters that they use. And also just like feeling confident when you do it. It really does come back to that. So if there's a particular problem you're trying to solve, one of the things you could do, and I know this is like a hack AI wise that I probably, I don't know. I do it where I just put my thought into the chat GPT and I'm like, hey, can you tell me an analogy for this? And chat GPT spits out something that's like really relatable. And then I just use that to be able to sort of engage with my audience and make it a little bit more human friendly. Because at the end of the day, like you're talking to a human being and they should be able to relate to you. And so that's part of being an effective storyteller. I love AI just because it's able to do that for me, and it's not a skill that I have very naturally. But yeah, I watch, again, a lot of TED Talks and just sort of learn how a lot of large presenters do it and sort of do it in the mirror, try to practice it, make it sound as natural as possible. But a lot of it comes down to your own personal life experiences as well that you can draw from and relate to. Would you say the experience of pitching starts to feel more natural over time? Absolutely. Like, you asked me to do this 5 years ago, I would have said definitely not. But it gets a lot easier. And the more times you do it, it becomes a part of your language. You realize things that might be receptive to one person isn't receptive to another. Like if you're talking to someone super technical, they may have a different response for you than someone who's non-technical. And then you learn how to slightly adjust your pitch depending on who you're speaking to. And it just comes out. Like I highly recommend these hackathons, and I highly recommend going to like IRL meetups and events and little mini hackathons that happen in various cities, just because the more you talk to people about it, the better you get. And at some point when you get on a call with a VC, it doesn't feel as intimidating anymore because you've talked about it so much that there's that inner confidence that you know what the hell you're talking about. In your experience, what are the most common reasons investors give for passing? So that's a very broad question because every VC has a different thesis. So Big Brain Holdings in particular, it's all proprietary capital. We don't manage any external liquidity. What that means is that we have a lot of freedom that other fund managers may not necessarily have. They have maybe more specific KPIs that they need to address, like is it returning X amount per month or per annum? How many users is it onboarding? And there's very key things that they're going to be looking for. So when we pass on a deal, it's generally because we either have like a lot of exposure in that space and we're waiting to see how that pans out. We don't think the space is scalable, for example. So there's like, we won't make a long-term investment on it. The team is not credible, or we don't trust that they have the capacity to deliver. The tech is not that innovative, or it can be easily replicated. There's like a number of things that we can look for, but those are, I guess, the most common ones that if we see too many people doing it already, it just comes across like you're just doing another one. So what's the point? So definitely try to be like creative, innovative, like build up your credibility in the space, like work on things that, you know, people could be able to vouch for you and say, yeah, I know this dev, they've worked on XYZ before, great experience. And that we can draw from those things to be able to have a little bit more confidence. But yeah, it also comes down to like, if it's just not a good fit in terms of like financially, like what does the valuation look like? Like, for example, we're an early stage investor. So if we're looking at something in a Series A or Series B, chances are it's a little bit too expensive for us because the valuations at that point, they're a lot higher and we just don't, it's not enough of a return for us that it just makes financial sense. Do you have any recommendations to best manage the voice while the pitch presentation? Yeah, so again, this comes back to just talking to someone about it, like timing yourself. So if you know you've got like a 15-minute pitch, just start the timer, talk to yourself in the mirror, talk to a friend or colleague. And like those are things that help. The thing is, it's very different when it comes to like language barriers. Like I find that we have more patience if we realize that the language we're speaking is not very like familiar to the other person. So there are different things that we can adjust for human beings, right? So if, let's say, I have a lot of devs that are based out of India, there's a clear language barrier most times. And all I do is just slow it down a little bit. And what I do, I take a look at the deck beforehand, before I get into the call anyway. So I kind of go in already having a high level of what to expect. And then I can just ask specific questions. From that point, when you realize it's an oral presentation and there's a communication gap, you might want to switch it over to Telegram or some other form of communication that's more written, so that you can use like Google Translate or something else to be able to bridge that language barrier. And I find that's most effective. Like if the call, like you're not getting it across verbally, then immediately just like, you know, switch to whatever's like preferred as a main type of communication. So it really comes down to who you're talking to and feel like comfortable with.
So we'll just give a moment, but see if anyone has any final questions. But yeah, thank you for the great talk and Q&A. It was really great hearing from you. And I'm sure everyone has found it quite useful.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here and appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity. Hello, what is your communication strategy plan to start the presentation session? Like storytelling, tech offices, break the ice. Yeah, it comes down to like how much time you've got. If it's a short one, then you do like your quick intro, high level, and then go into things. If you're someone who likes to break the ice, like I personally am an introvert, and so I hate icebreakers, like absolutely find them mortifying. So I just like to like go straight into what makes me comfortable, which is talking about investing and startups and what I'm like passionate about. So yeah, it just comes down to you and your personality and what feels comfortable for you. At the end of the day, if it's not comfortable, you probably shouldn't be the one doing it. and I know that sounds like really harsh, but I always say, like, if you know that this is not your comfort and you're not, this is not what makes you shine, then feel free to delegate that to someone who that is their thing. If you've got an extrovert on your team, feel free to put it there for them. They will love that. So at the end of the day, it comes down to that confidence, that comfort level, and you just kind of have to feel the room at that point in time. Yeah, you guys are reposted. Not sure if there are any other questions I see in the chat.
I think someone just reposted a question that, hello, what is your communication strategy plan to start the presentation session? Did we answer this one?
Yeah, that's the one with and if you want to make a joke, sure, or you want to have an icebreaker, sure. But I just personally go straight into what I'm comfortable with. But again, it comes down to your comfort level, right? And you know your team, you know who's best to talk publicly. You know the people that they tend to be more natural at it, and feel free to tap them on the show. There's also a lot of consultancy services that exist for startups. If you go through accelerators or like these hackathons, and they put you in contact with some of the best people who this is all they do, is they talk to VCs on your behalf. Like, that's actually a service because they know that it's not an easy thing to do. And the thing is, when you're building a product and you're also raising funding, it's very hard to do both at the same time. And so there's a lot of gaps that people can fill, like Encode doing this particular session is one of them, right? So yeah, it's just being able to find the right partners to help you where you need to in the journey.
So thanks everyone for the really insightful. And just as a quick reminder, if anyone again has any further questions about the hackathon that you can't find answers to on the hacker pack, again, remember to reach out to myself or Dan using the one-on-one calls at the links at the bottom of the pack, and we'd love to hear about what everyone is building or working on or thinking about building. And a final reminder that the next session tomorrow will be at 10:30 a.m. GMT, which is another AMA with Jorn Rong, co-founder of StepIn. So all remember to bring your questions for them. And that's all from me. If there are no more questions, I'll be ending the session for now. Say hello to Dan and Jorn for me tomorrow. And goodbye, everyone. Again, it was really nice to hear from you, Veets, and thanks for the Q&A.
Thanks, guys. Take care.